What is up, watch friends? Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces with Tony. And today, I'm going to talk about what I'm wearing on my wrist. Yes, I was a watchmaker, and I was fairly successful at it. So, one of my viewers asked me to elaborate on this, and I did a previous video. But anyway, let's roll the intro, and we'll talk about it. You're watching Timepieces with Tony. Talking Timepieces with Tony. All right, so thank you first and foremost to everyone who likes and subscribes. It helps me out. It really does, just because it keeps me motivated to keep doing videos. And I thank you all who have done that and the support. And people who are like randomly sending me money, I really appreciate it. But you don't have to do that. But I do appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and that also helps me motivated to keep doing this. So wanted to talk about my days as a watchmaker. Now, I've been in the business for a long time, and I didn't start making watches till about the year 2000, so about 23 years ago. And when I say I was a watchmaker, I'm going to use that term loosely. I was primarily a watch designer, and I would assemble the watches, deassemble them, regulate them, and all that. Could I take apart an automatic Patek Philippe, calendar and put it back together successfully? No, probably not. But I knew enough, and I started tinkering with watches when I was very young. And it started with a little Mickey Mouse watch that I had when I was a kid that didn't work, and I took it apart and see if I could get it working and put it back together, and I was successful at that. And how I started essentially was I was, always been into watches, but in the music industry, and I was really looking for something. I just wanted to get into the watch industry, and but I also know that you know it's a great undertaking to get into the watch industry. So I had come off of a pretty big tour. I'd been gone for a long time in the music, and I initially started buying and selling Rolex. Now, this is before they called it flipping and all that stuff, and you could get any Rolex at an AD. I was just getting enough pre-owned and making a little bit of a profit and whatever. And eventually, I made enough money to say, "Hey, I'm going to try to start getting into my own watch company." And it was very difficult at first trying to get the research. Keep in mind, we didn't have the internet like we do today. We had the internet, but we didn't have all this stuff on our phones. Um, and where do you start? And I finally found a company that would mold me the cases. You have to pay for the molds, and then the dial designs. I would sit on my computer and just come up with these designs, and these particular ones, for instance, were all hand painted. And then they would send me the cases, the crystals, the crowns, the hands, and then I would put them together, and that's how I started with this. So essentially, we like today. I wouldn't want to try to even comprehend trying to get into the watch business today. It's easy to find companies now to build you watches and just stamp your name on it. Back then, no, it was a whole different ball of fish, man. Ball of fish. What's wrong with me? But it was something that I was very passionate about, and it was a really good time, and it was frustrating, and it was a lot of work. And if I could redo it all over again, I probably wouldn't, to try to even do anything like what I accomplished. And so I started again with just one watch at a time, and then I started selling them, and they were selling, and eventually I managed to get my watches into a couple of stores in downtown LA, one company called Diamond Design. And in fact, that Anthony Ferrer, which timepiece gentleman guy, when he moved out to LA, he did a video and he was doing some work with Diamond Design. I'm like, oh shit, they used to carry my watches. So, um, it was difficult, and it was fun, and it didn't end up and work out the way I wanted it to. And that's just because I couldn't keep up with the the demand, and I didn't have a high demand, but essentially what I was doing was I'd make watches. I got them into some of the stores, and then in 2005, so in 2004, there, you would go into Barnes and Noble's bookstore, and they would have all these watch magazines. And I used to read those magazines and read those magazines. And one day I'm going to be in this magazine. They'd have a buyer's guide that came out every year. And one day I'm going to be in that. And it just so happens in 2004, I contacted Watch Time Buyer's Guide and said, hey, I make watches. Are you interested in checking them out? And they were like, yeah, sure, man, we'll check them out. And they checked out my watches and they said, hey, we'd love to feature, I think it was 3 or 4 of my watches in their upcoming 2005 Buyer's Guide, submit photos and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, holy shit, really? And so I came up with these, I called this, what was that? Legato Automatic. Legato, it was a music reference for smooth. At a 2846 movement, day, date, function. Very limited. And so I'd sent them a few of my watch photos, and sure enough, I decided to also send them one of my watches. And they sent me a letter. The editor sent me a letter. I'm going to put a picture up, but I'm going to read it to you. This is a book that I had. I used to use Stingray straps on all my watches. Not all of them, most of them. And got some Stingray skin and had this book made. It was like a promo book you would hand to dealers to have them look at it. And, it had, like, that's the watch I was just wearing with a Stingray strap. And then this was another one. I don't have one of these. These were all gone. And some of the, again, but I had also a phrase. Oh, here was another one called, it was a tonneau shape, called the Grand Cayman. And, I had a phrase that was called timeless art handcrafted in the United States. That was one of my counter displays that you would put on the counter. And just various different watches, and had the reference number. People could look at it. And so anyway, sorry, I'm just flipping through this real quick. Watch Time magazine, the editor sent me this beautiful letter, dated October 6, 2004. It said, hi Tony, thank you so very much for the beautiful watch. Its arrival sparked quite a stir here, and our editors and staff were all very impressed by its design. Very lovely indeed. I hope you will find the finished buyer's guide equally impressive. Much luck in your success as a talented watchmaker. Looking forward to all the great compliments I will receive when wearing it, because I sent them a watch and it was a lady's watch. And of course, I'll be sure to pass your information on to any inquiries. Kind regards, Anne-Marie Lee, Project Editor, Watch Time Magazine. I couldn't believe it when that magazine came out. And, I was in the music industry at that time, and I was more well-known. People tend to forget who you are after a couple of minutes, And so I got used to seeing myself in music magazines and shit like that, or whatever it may have been. But walking into a mall, and then when I was traveling, or walking into a grocery store and seeing a magazine, the Watch Time Buyer's Guide, and that your watch is in there, and you're like, oh my God, and then that's where you start thinking everything's going to start blowing up and blowing up. And unfortunately, it is what happened, but it isn't what happened, because I got contacted by a very big luxury department store. And I'm not going to mention the name, but you'll know who they are if I did. And they wanted to place a small order for each of their stores, but a very small order for each of their locations is a very large undertaking that I couldn't do it. And I started panicking, and I kind of freaked out. I also had to work. I'm a musician, I play, and I couldn't get into saying, hey, I can't give up music now because that's not my prime source of income to full-time watchmaking because I'm not making enough to sustain a lifestyle or a decent living at this point in time. So eventually I just kind of, things happened, and I just kind of folded, and it was unfortunate, but it's what happens. It's a very difficult industry. Um, and so I I didn't know what to do. It was a solo operation, of course, micro brand, but I wanted to also make watches that were different, and that's what I did. I didn't want to make watches that were the same as what everyone else was doing. So that's where these the hand painted dials came into play, and in this case, each one of these dials is a little bit different. No two are the same because they're hand painted, sorry. And I had some standard looking watches as well. And there's a moon phase with a calendar. And then this model was called a California 67. I based this off of a Vacheron Constantin, the dial with the numbers the way they are. This watch these are prototypes, but this watch still runs very well without it even being serviced. And we got some of this here. This is a quartz watch. And when it came down to it, well, one of my favorite ones is this is one of a kind. There's only one of these. I made several skeleton watches that were successful, and they all sold out. And then I came up with this one, and they it was towards the end when I stopped doing it, but it's beautiful. I called this the Capri Skeleton, because there was another jewelry store in downtown LA called Capri Jewelers that bought a shit ton of my skeleton watches. So these were great watches. I'm going to put this on the wrist real quick, and then I'm going to throw up a video of how my parts came and how I used to assemble them. So so I have this. Okay, so it's beautiful. It's got the cabochon, similar to Cartier. However, this is an actual sapphire, not a spinel. So anyway, how I would get the watches is I would get the dials, the hands, everything separately, and I'm going to show you the videos of a quartz watch. Quartz watches were easy to do because you don't have to service them, you don't have to calibrate them. They're just the way they are, and they were just really easy. And they were my cheaper, lower end line, but I use very high end quartz movements. And there's my cat Uku. And also, again, once you get the finished product, it's just like looking at it. And I haven't made a watch. The last watch I made was a few years ago, and it was for my neighbor who moved to Belize, and I just did it in my kitchen real quick. I could show you all the tools and stuff. I don't have all the tools, but it's very difficult for me to do watches now because I tend to shake, and it's hard for me to get screwed. Yeah, it's one of those things anyway. So here's a couple of other ones that don't have straps on them. Another moon phase. I love moon phase watches. This is one of my favorites. This was one of the first watches I ever made. Salmon dial. This is I should have put Breguet hands on it. It would have, I think, made it look a little more classy, but with these hands, it was a little bit more sporty on that end, and kind of more IWC-ish. Here again is one of my other skeleton watches. And I had so many different designs, but like for instance, this big ass square clunker thingy. And then I had a regulator, which where the hour hand and the minute hand are separated and whatever. But very, it was a good time. It was a shame. It's difficult for me to talk about it. I hope you guys are still watching. If you are, then great. If you're not, then you don't even know what I'm saying now, so it doesn't matter. But it was definitely, I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot what not to do and what to do if I was to do it again. But, again, it's just the time. And I just I couldn't do it now. It's just a lot of work, and it's a little bit easier now to get, you got Alibaba, you can get your name stamped on anything nowadays, but back then it wasn't, but at least I did it. It was something that I was able to accomplish, and I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to do that. So I'm sure that, I was just winging this video, but again, these are fun times. I don't wear any of these watches anymore. They just sit in the box, but it was a good time. um so, but like I say, at least I did it. you know and I thank you all for watching and liking and subscribing and all that, you guys. So that's all I have to say about this, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, take care.